Now that we've completed all of our anatomy studies, it's time to begin working the way that we're going to be working on figure paintings for the rest of the course. The beginning will start with an open grisaille, much like we did in the first term. Then we're going to practice a closed grisaille block into the figure, and then we're going to practice a full color block into the figure. From these different starting methods, you're going to select which one is most resonant with you, and we'll continue on in the third term by working in that manner. So each period here, each class period, we're going to work on a different method. And the first this week, today, is going to be the open grisaille method. You might have recalled from the first term, the demonstration I gave was an open grisaille method of a friant painting, the back painting. We're going to proceed with this demonstration in pretty much the same way. So we'll have the figure set up. We'll get our canvas that's non-absorbent, hopefully an oil-primed ground that will allow us to be a little more flexible with the paint application. We'll make sure things don't stain and get too dark too fast. We're going to start with larger brushes and establish bigger, broader shapes and bigger, broader values using thinner to thin the paint and get it a little more movable. Now, the more successful you are at establishing a correct value relationship early on with the thinner, the easier the later stages are going to be. It's going to be basically a refinement of those bigger shapes with our smaller brushes, using scumbling or subtracting the paint, or maybe with a paper towel to lift off small amounts of paint or small shapes as needed. And of course, remember, as soon as the paint has dried on top of the canvas to a small degree, we can begin to use our click eraser to get even finer detailed shapes. Now, the trick to this being a block-in is that we really do need to focus on the major relationships. So the most important shapes, the most important values, and then locking in on to some of the key edges. That's what's going to make a successful block-in. Here's an example of a 1-hour demonstration that I gave the last time for this painting course here. Now, we can see that it's not highly complex, but it does give a strong visual image of what the model is and what the lighting condition is on the model. And that's supported not only by the values, but also by the edge quality that's in here. So don't neglect the importance of edge quality. What tends to happen with this type of painting is that students approach it a little too timidly, perhaps, and thus a large amount of scumbling is required after the initial block-in, and that tends to lead to very soft and hazy edges, things, and unclear shapes, essentially. And this becomes makes it more difficult to lay the later layers of paint down because it's too obscure. You want this to really look as close as you can to the finished painting as you can get it, except that you're using open grisaille. So even though it is a slightly different working process and there's no opaque paint, it should be very similar to the end product, whether or not that end product is sort of a smooth, uniform finish, or there's splashy brush marks in it that look like you've dry brushed. Keep in mind we want to reference our brushstroke chart if we have any questions on how to make some of these marks on here. There's probably going to be a lot of soft on, soft off, painting with transparency, some dry brushing towards the end, and then some scumbling. We can utilize all of these brush strokes in an open grisaille to get the quality of an oil painting, which is kind of what we're looking for, even though it's transparent and we're using the white of the canvas for it. So that's our assignment. I encourage you to only spend 3 hours, maybe 4 hours on an assignment such as this. Anything longer on an open grisaille will tend to result in an overworking or an attempt to overmodel, which is very, very difficult to achieve successfully in one session here. And you'll start to lose edge quality. Edge quality is probably the biggest thing you're going to lose when you spend too much time working on this. So especially if your intent or goal is to become an alla prima or a direct painter, you need to really master the more direct process of a figure underpainting, focusing on those big shapes like we did with the notan and drawing, and then locking in onto those key edge qualities that we need for the painting. And then try not to do too much scumbling or layering after that initial block-in unless it's absolutely necessary. So while in the beginning you might be spending 3 to 4 hours on a painting such as this, ultimately when you become a more experienced artist, you're probably only going to be spending maybe 20 minutes to 40 minutes on something like this before moving on, if your intent is to be a direct painter. If you're going to be more of a layered painter, building it up over lots of time and many sessions, and certainly you can commit more time to something like this. Obviously you want as much clarity as possible with each layer of a painting. So you may end up spending several days on this portion of the painting, but you have to remember to use a large variety of brushes, and when you have a small shape, really use a small brush to get in there and noodle it as needed. But keep in mind you want to really try and direct your working process to the type of painting that you want to be doing, so that you don't hurt yourself later on down the road. If you want to be a direct painter, you have to practice doing this very directly, very quickly, and then maybe hit up some open studios and try to do 3 of these block-ins or so in a 3-hour session if you can. And that should get you up to par on some of your block-in abilities with this monochrome.